Welcome everyone to today's conference between Unions 21 and Thompsons. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Becky Wright and I'm the Executive Director of Unions 21. A few kind of house notices before we make a start. The Minister for Employment Rights can't make it today, so she sent us a little message of which we're going to hopefully...
Hi everybody, I'm Kate Daden, Minister for Employment Rights and Consumer Protections and the Member of Parliament for Halifax. I'm really sorry I can't be with you all today. I'm in Parliament in a Westminster Hall debate, but I know how important this conference is today. I want to thank Unions 21 for bringing everybody together to talk about how we can strengthen collective voice and share those practical strategies, particularly for trade unions, as a really, really important part of that discussion and agenda for the government too. And on that note, I just wanted to update you on the work that I'm doing in the Department of Business and Trade and the priorities of this government for working people and for strengthening collective voice. A big part of that is our Employment Rights Bill, a huge bit of legislation, but really important to upgrade our employment rights legislation so it's fit for the 21st century, that it reflects the working practices that people face today and the different ways of how, when and where people work. Massively overdue and a really, really important bit of legislation and agenda for this government, whether we're looking to sick pay, to extending protections for pregnant mothers, to unfair dismissal, ending exploitative zero-hour contracts and so much more. But particularly the role that this bill has for trade unions and in strengthening collective voice and working in partnership with employers, trade unions and other stakeholders to make sure that we can have an industrial relations framework that works for the world of work today. And to hear that positive message from the government that we want to work together, we want to work in a tripartite way for good industrial relations in this country, alongside an employment rights agenda fit for the 21st century. So it's an agenda that's really close to my heart, as lots of you will know my background working for a community trade union and on the board of Unions 21 previously. So to be able to take in this legislation through as a key part of our department's agenda and the government is really important to me and one we are determined to get right to. So I want to thank everybody in the room for all your engagement with me and the department and my predecessors so far on our legislative agenda in this space, and for your work and support going forwards as we move to hopefully implementation soon once we get past the ping pong stage in the House of Commons and the House of Lords on the Employment Rights Bill and get to Royal Assent. There's lots of detail for us to work through and we're really keen to hear your voices as part of that. At the moment there are 4 consultations that are currently live, one on trade union access to the right to inform employees of their right to join a union, to extending protections for mothers and bereavement leave. So please do get involved in those consultations and look out for the ones that are upcoming as well. There's lots of package of policy to get stuck into as part of our wider Make Work Pay agenda. So please do get involved and thank you so much for all your work. And a final thank you to Unions 21, who are a really, really important voice in this space of strengthening collective voice and for working with unions to innovate, collaborate and strengthen collective voice. Thank you so much for all that you do for everybody in the room and the role that you play for empowering workers in a changing world. I look forward to continue working with you.
So I'm just going to kind of lay out a little bit about why this conference exists and the topics that we're going to be covering over the course of today. And I was looking through our archive of work and it came to mind that my first Unions 21 conference as the Executive Director was nearly 10 years ago, and amazingly I haven't aged a day. And in that, thank you for the laugh there, I wrote a paper for Unions 21, and when I say I wrote it, that's a very generous description. I asked a lot of very clever, very interesting people to contribute to a paper which was about how we build tomorrow's unions, and it's the name of the paper and it is available not in any good booksellers but on our website should you wish to have a look at it. And in that paper we covered key questions that were challenging unions at the time: whether we can harness robots in the world of work, the coming of a digital revolution, and Peter himself was so gracious then as he is now to talk about the future of employment relations and the changing landscape. There were some fantastic case studies from unions that covered how we deal with atypical workers, including younger workers, understanding how to shape unions for workers, and how we can really understand the needs of members and our stakeholders. And I know that some of you who are in the audience were contributors to that, and so thank you very much for that. I'm still mining your ideas. My real contribution to that was to bring everything together. And at the time, I had been watching an awful lot of CBeebies, and it really did impact how I was looking at stuff. And again, some of you may remember that I made a rather bold leap to say that I think you can understand the change in the labour market if you'd ever watched Postman Pat. So let me just explain that a little bit, which is that Postman Pat was originally created in 1981 for the BBC. Everybody knows his bright red van, which was symbolic of his employer of the time, the Royal Mail. He delivered letters, and only letters, around his small little Cumbrian village to a small and regular cast of characters who were mainly older men, but with one token postmistress. Come 1996, Pat is rebooted, and in this change, his life has expanded. He has a family, as do now most of his friends. Congratulations to them all. And the community not only includes them, but also a wealth of women, people of colour, and he's visiting larger towns and having cultural highlights across the way. He's now not just delivering letters, but also packages. Come 2008, Pat's working life has completely changed. He's no longer employed by the Royal Mail, and in fact, I think it's Special Delivery Service. You can fact check that. And he's on some kind of 0 hours contract because his manager, Ben, calls him and tells him, drop everything, Pat. I've got an urgent package that needs to be delivered. So he has to make his excuses to his family. I'm sorry, Timmy, Justin, something like that. It's time to head off and go round. He now has to also operate a whole range of vehicles, which I'm not entirely sure he was trained up to do, because things sometimes go very wrong. And I think this really kind of sums up some of the things that we have to deal with, that while Pat's life has expanded and changed and become enriched, his working life has become more precarious and does not look like what it looked like in the 1980s. And so it's really interesting to me that the topics we're going to be talking about today, on paper, seem very similar to the sorts of topics we were talking about in that first paper 10 years ago. And does that mean that we have failed and not moved on? Well, look, I'm a trade unionist, so I'm also an optimist. And I think what it means is that we're always constantly asking the right kinds of questions, but that the context and the situation that we're asking them in is constantly changing, and that requires us to always be learning. And I think it's positive that as a community, we are asking ourselves these fundamental questions about who our members are, where they are, what they're doing, how do we develop activists, how do we empower them, how do we help them to do their jobs and build local connections, how do we reflect what members think, feel and do, and how do we best engage them? And ultimately, how do we know what's on our members' minds, what they truly care about, so that we can win meaningful change in the workplace and beyond? It is in asking these tough and necessary questions that's the hallmark of us here at Unions 21. And while it's lovely to see so many familiar faces, there's also, I recognise in the room, people that this is their first Unions 21 conference. So you are all very welcome. We're an inclusive and collaborative space, and we really want to hear your views just as much as anyone else. At our last conference, there was a huge amount of tech failure, and someone messaged me afterwards to say, don't worry, Becky, I come for the camaraderie and the provocation, not the slick tech expertise, which I think was meant to make me feel really positive, but you know. And I hope by the end of today that you have come out of here, used your time to network effectively and made some new friends and colleagues. I want to take the opportunity to thank Thompsons for their ongoing support, especially for this conference, and to acknowledge that beneficial relationship, which I hope goes both ways. In terms of the content and flow for today, we're going to be hearing firstly from Paul and Peter about where they think the major challenges and opportunities are for the Employment Rights Bill here in the UK and a post-bill environment. Neil and Professor Mel Sims will be exploring how we can raise to that challenge. And also we have later on Owen Reedy from the Irish Congress of Trade Unions to speak about the new landscape that is happening over there. So we've got an awful lot to learn, an awful lot to listen, an awful lot to talk about. There's going to be some really interesting workshops led by colleagues from both unions and also Thompsons. Now, we're ambitious with our stickers, trying to help you navigate which workshop you'd kind of picked, but I think it is going to be a little bit of a free-for-all, so we'll see what happens. And lastly, we're going to be talking through some polling later on this afternoon that we've done with Stonehaven and Public First, which outlines what workers in the private sector think about unions joining and what they're looking for. And I'm going to give you a slight spoiler. Workers think unions are great and useful. They just don't think it's for them personally. And so on that happy and cheery note, I hope you have a good conference. Our team and colleagues are around for the rest of the day. If you've got any questions, please feel free to grab us. And I'm going to start off with Paul. So thank you very much.